Yes, we have no occultism. In this episode of Satansplain, we'll take a look at Magus Gilmore's essay on distinguishing Satanism from occult religions. Also a satanic anecdote about non-Satanists and Satanists in a crowd. Plus, answers to questions about Goodguy badges, life and death, and atheists and the human need for religion.
Well, it's not Satan worship, it's Satanism. It's embracing the life-enriching things which have traditionally been given the devil's name. Pride, lust, earthly success, rational self-interest, atheism, humor, nonconformity, science, a passion for living, being selective about whom we love. We don't see these as shameful sins, but empowering ideals. And we also recognize the psychological power and fun of symbolism and aesthetics, so we utilize Satan as mythology's most fitting mascot for what we're about.
Satansplain, Satanic Talk with Church of Satan Magister Bill M.
Magister Bill M. here with Satansplain. I'm going to get to some listener mail in the second half of this episode, but I wanted to start by reading an essay. This is an essay by Church of Satan High Priest, Magus Peter H. Gilmore, and the essay is titled, Yes, We Have No Occultism. You can find it on churchofsatan.com. Perhaps some of you know what song the article title is a parody of. I'm going to read this essay and insert some thoughts along the way. Let's begin. Yes, We Have No Occultism by Magus Peter H. Gilmore. As I have written, we resist all who would try and inject aspects of supernaturalism and theism into what was stated by Anton LaVey to be a philosophy dedicated to rational self-interest, indulgence, and the glorification of the material and carnal aspects of life. Satanism supports science and clearly advocates keeping an open mind as we continue to learn more about the universe. LaVey was always very careful to use terms like supernormal or supranormal for any atypical experiences which can be documented and examined, as they are part of nature, but not yet explained via current scientific theoretical models. They may be unusual events, yet still part of nature. And just to pause the essay reading here, for more on that topic, by the way, you can listen to Satansplain episode number 70 on the allegedly supernatural versus the supernormal. Continuing the essay. Occultism, however, refers to spiritually orientated systems of thought that typically include supernatural aspects, which are fundamental to their premises and practices. As Satanism is not devil worship, it is also not occultism, nor are these spiritual aspects underpinning the philosophy. However, since Satanism advocates free thought and exploration of what might be of interest to each Satanist, some of our members might choose to examine various forms of occult thought, both past and present, and this is not in any way forbidden. It is not encouraged either. Just as we advocate freedom of choice in human sexuality, we champion freedom of choice in subjects one might research. But we don't suggest that our members must examine or embrace things that are part of their personal, natural predilections. When a subject captures the interest of a Satanist, even if it is some other symbol system, religion, or philosophy, it doesn't then become a de facto part of Satanism. Knowing the boundaries between what defines Satanism as a philosophy and what are outside interests or pursuits is crucial for the Satanist and indeed for anyone who wishes to understand various philosophies and disciplines so that their own internal logic, or lack thereof, can be examined with clarity. If one muddies and adulterates these various approaches, one cannot grasp their intended purposes and judge them with any accuracy. As should be obvious from the many things our members create, from writings to art and music, the Church of Satan does not attempt to limit their interests in whatever strikes their fancy. We gladly promote their creations, since such things are meant as signifiers of each specific, unique individual, and are not claimed to be part of the definition of the philosophy of Satanism. Our members at times might be intrigued by other religions, from neo-pagan and Eastern beliefs to ancient doctrines, a broad range of philosophies and disciplines such as yoga and the martial arts of various cultures that often include spiritual components, and the rational basis of the coherent philosophy we defined as Satanism provides an excellent platform for open critical examination of many perspectives, whether they are rational or not. Our members are free to extract and employ whatever they find in them to be beneficial to themselves. From the earliest days of the Church of Satan, which was founded during an quote-unquote occult revival in Western society, aspects of what was then swirling through popular culture were examined in our newsletter, The Cloven Hoof. Some articles were humorous, tongue-in-cheek mockeries of astrology, pyramid power, and other similar ultra subjects that Dr. LeVay called occultnik. You know, kind of like a play on the word beatnik. That's what I always took as occultnik. Anyway, continuing the essay. Often meant to see who amongst the membership might be more absorbed in the occulture of the time rather than being interested in Satanism as a tool for life enhancement. It should be noted that there were professional astrologers amongst the membership who made money off of the popular belief in that pseudoscience. At times, these pieces served to flush out those who were trying to insert a creeping theism into Satanism, those who were trying to redefine Satanism in spiritual or occult terms were invited to depart and do their own thing. It has always been a healthy approach. It's kept the core of Satanism quite explicit and useful for our adherents, and has helped those who come to a position that is outside of the defining principles of Satanism to realize that the time has come for them to change their self-definition to something else, and not try and shoehorn their incongruent personal ideas into Satanic philosophy. So to be clear, Satanism is a carnal, not a spiritual religion, and it is not a form of occultism. It is an atheist, materialist philosophy that promotes individualism, rational self-interest, and the celebration of the one life we have. We see humans as animals, and we Satanists do our best to enhance our earthly existence in the universe, which we continue to explore. We rejoice in the fleshly life. And to pause the essay reading here, you may remember that line from one of the lines in the Satanic Bible. I have taken thy name as part of myself. I live as the beasts of the field, rejoicing in the fleshly life. That's a line from the invocation to Satan as part of the standard 13-step Satanic ritual. Our administrators actively discourage people who approach us for membership seeking an esoteric, initiatory spiritual experience. The Church of Satan does not offer that. We do not play bait and switch, which would be an easy approach toward fleecing the wannabe occultnik rubes who write us daily. Instead, we are quite upfront that there is no secret inner circles or other forms of hidden teachings. Turning away those who have a mistaken perception of Satanism is our constant practice. Time is too precious to waste on those misguided seekers. Our members have always been free to investigate divergent doctrines and disciplines, and we expect them to have the intelligence to be able to understand the difference between Satanism and these other approaches towards defining humanity's role in the universe, in whatever ways they are not congruent with our philosophy. The Church of Satan holds to Anton LaVey's original vision of a third-side perspective blending aspects of psychology, individualist philosophy, and religion into a carnal doctrine, defining those rare iconoclasts for whom the challenge of taking responsibility for their lives is an exhilarating path to self-fulfillment. And that concludes the essay, Yes, We Have No Occultism, from Magus Peter H. Gilmore. Let's get to some listener mail. Zach writes to say, if someone were to take inspiration from the Church of Satan's religious philosophy and cited it as a source in their own philosophy book, what would be your view on this? Maybe even the Church's stance on someone taking inspiration and citing the works of Satanism. Well, I wrote back to Zach and said that, frankly, I don't think I'd really have a problem with it so long as they had the honesty to call this new philosophy of theirs something other than Satanism. I've certainly met some people who were not Satanists, but felt that they got something out of Satanism. I've met people who said they read the Satanic Bible, for example, and were glad that they did, and they got some kind of special view or something special to think about after reading it. just not enough to conclude themselves Satanists, and that's fine. I can't fault a non-Satanist for finding something they like in Satanism or getting some kind of inspiration from it, however small or big of a way that might be. I have likewise known people who were practitioners of witchcraft and still weren't Satanists, perhaps mainly due to theistic beliefs, but still felt that they really, really got something out of the book, The Satanic Witch. And again, that's fine. It's not like I would gain something by converting them to Satanism. You know, that's not how Satanism works. But getting back to this hypothetical idea of somebody writing a philosophy book and citing Satanism as one of its influences, well, it's worth pointing out that every religion and philosophy is something that has its own share of influences. Every philosophy or religion that exists was created by somebody who was influenced by prior ones. They had their share of people who inspired them, writings that inspired them. They took the parts that they thought worked. They mixed that with personal experiences. They maybe injected a little something new, and they organized it coherently enough to distinguish it as a new religion or new philosophy. What I do, however, object to are people who take part of LaVey, or maybe even none of LaVey, and mix that with other things and try passing it off under the name Satanism. I know I talked about this at length back around Satansplain episode number 71, and maybe even its 2 follow-up episodes from there, so go to those if you want to hear more about that. But to tie this back to the Yes, We Have No Occultism essay, and I think I talk about this in that aforementioned Satansplain episode number 71 as well, there's a somewhat related phenomenon I want to mention. You see, once in a while, I'll run into somebody who wants to play the cafeteria religion game. That's what I call it, and this person says, well, I've read the Satanic Bible, and I like Satanism, but I also like these other occult books that are not Satanism, or this kind of socio-political idea that isn't necessarily Satanism, and I want to combine all these things to make a new type of Satanism. And to that, I have to ask, are you sure that's really necessary and helpful? I mean, first of all, are these external ideas you're bringing into the picture actually congruent with Satanism? Well, either they are or they aren't. If they aren't congruent, and if they're beliefs that in fact fundamentally run contrary to Satanism, then you should be honest with yourself and call your smorgasbord of a practice something other than Satanism. Again, there's no rational reason to take the label of a fully established ideology and slap it on something that's too fundamentally different. You can't say, well, I believe in what's in the Satanic Bible, except that one part about God's being the creation of man. I want to practice the same thing, but you see, I want to worship a literal Satan and do blood sacrifices. No. Satanism is not customizable to the point where you can just throw away the fundamental concepts that connect everything else in Satanism and still try to call it Satanism. That's not how labels work. Now, on the other hand, if what you're trying to inject is not contrary to Satanism and is something already allowed within the framework of Satanism, well, okay, you're then just a Satanist who happens to be into that thing. You're not the leader of a new denomination or anything. Maybe you're somebody who says, I'm a Satanist, but I also like reading Aleister Crowley and using this Japanese Shinto imagery and ritual. Okay, fine, do it. Nobody at the Church of Satan is stopping you. I'm a Satanist and I like tarot cards. I want to put the Ace of Cups card on my altar. Okay, go for it. There's nothing in the rules for ritual saying you can't. I'm a Satanist and I also want to be a political activist for the environment. Fine, do it. You don't need to declare it a new type of Satanism. Well, enough about that. Let's get to another letter here. Church of Satan Reverend Jared Mammon wrote to me to share a satanic anecdote of his own. And yes, that means it is time for the segment of Satansplain for satanic anecdotes, or as we call them here, Satanicdotes for short. Cue the Satanicdote theme song.
Satanic Anecdotes. Satanicdotes.
Reverend Jared says that on this past Halloween night, he had gone to an event called the Devil's Night, which was led by Church of Satan Reverend Andy Howell down in Florida. Jared says it was a great show with a couple of different bands, and that while there were plenty of Satanists in attendance, there was also a number of non-Satanists in attendance. And this is where he says is where, the real Satanicdotes begin. To quote Reverend Jared, while talking with a Church of Satan priestess, a song came on that sampled the choir music from the movie The Omen. Recognizing it immediately, I told her how that was a song that really got me hooked on horror movies. I asked her if she had seen the remake of The Omen, adding that it was really good. She replied, yes, I am in the DVD extras. Jared then thinks to himself, oh yeah, duh, of course she is. I forgot who I was talking to. Because you see, with normal people, they'll say they saw this or that movie or heard this or that thing, but with Satanists, you may indeed find them connected to it. Movers and shakers confirmed. Jared goes on to say, the evening ended with a ritual read by Reverend Andy Howell and Reverend Christopher Lee. They added some impressive performance art which involved our traditional altar, but added some theatrics for the sake of the concert. I was standing next to a fellow Church of Satan member, and we couldn't help but notice that the non-Satanists were quite easy to spot in the crowd. During the ritual, it was the non-Satanists who were talking and cheering, while all the Church of Satan members were silent. The non-Satanists would repeat the wrong parts at the wrong time because they had obviously never heard it before. However, the best part was listening to their reaction to the blasphemy and watching them lose their minds over a topless woman. And all the while, we Satanists in attendance knew that most of these people there had no idea that they were just part of a real ritual conducted by real clergy from the Church of Satan. At a heavy metal show, wearing a sigil of Baphomet is blending in. We thought that was amusing. And that concludes the Satanicdote from Reverend Jared. Let's take a break right now. You are listening to Satansplain.
You are listening to Satansplain, real satanic talk with Church of Satan Magister Bill M. For questions, comments, and correspondence, send an email to bill@satansplain.com.
The Blues Diabolic Podcast, a regular indulgence in the devil's music. Join your host, Fat Max, in a journey into the blues, the artists, the sounds, and the history of this fascinating music, from its humble beginnings right up to present-day legends. Because it has been said that the devil has the best tunes. The Blues Diabolic Podcast on Radio Free Satan. Hail the blues and hail Satan.
The Millionaire Satanist by Reverend Robert Ing is not a book of comfort. It is a weapon, a scalpel for cutting through the noise of manipulation, cultural sedation, and emotional coercion that parade as wisdom in the modern age. Inside, you will not find hollow affirmations, romanticized martyrdom, or the soft language of passive survival. What you will find is a raw, reasoned guide to preserving your sovereignty, mentally, emotionally, strategically. You'll learn why your survival must come before sentiment, how to exploit societal systems without breaking their rules, and how to recognize the labels others stick on you before you become trapped inside their expectations. This book isn't about being liked. It's about being lucid. It's about surviving with your identity intact, be it in the boardroom, in your personal life, or in a collapsing cultural landscape that rewards performance over authenticity. You've been made to feel guilty for putting yourself first. That ends here. Read it if you're done being used. Keep it if you're ready to think clearly. Apply it if you're ready to win. The Millionaire Satanist by Reverend Robert Ing, along with companion piece, The Millionaire Satanist, The Chaos Planner, can be yours today. Available at Amazon.com. Get yours while you still can.
Magister Bill M. here with Satansplain. Visit the main website for the show at Satansplain.com. There you can find every Satansplain episode. You can also listen to Satansplain on Spotify, YouTube, Audible, and a host of other places. If you are on social media, please give Satansplain a like and a follow, whatever the equivalent is, on Facebook, X, and YouTube. Likewise, if you're listening now on YouTube, please don't forget to hit that like button for this episode. For all questions and correspondence, you can email me directly. The address is bill@satansplain.com. If you enjoy Satansplain and would like to support the show, please go to the show's page on Locals. Point your web browsers to satansplain.locals.com. You can sign up for Locals for free, but you can also additionally become a paid subscriber there. That is the best way you can support the show. Though we also have a merch store. You can go to store.satansplain.com for that. And thank you, as always, to all of you who support Satansplain in one way or another. And let's get back to some listener mail. Stampy writes in to say, Dear Magister Bill, first let me say that I love Satansplain. You have a true gift that helps those of us that want to learn more with a great attention to detail. I found Satanism earlier this year at the tender young age of 61. Unfortunately, I was duped by the Salem Prank group, but if it wasn't for them, I never would have taken the deeper dive to learn all that I could, which eventually led me to the Church of Satan. I have read the Satanic Bible, the Satanic Rituals, and the Satanic Witch. I am now reading the Satanic Scriptures. I plan on joining the Church of Satan. I just feel like I need to learn more and figure out what I have to offer. Until then, I can firmly state that I am a DeFacto Satanist and one of your biggest fans. Well, thank you, Stampy. I wrote back to Stampy. First of all, though, I have to say that whether you are a Satanist who didn't really discover Satanism until pretty late in life, or your introduction to Satanism was through some sort of pseudo-Satanism, something that really wasn't Satanism at all, well, the important thing in either case, I would say, is that you still found Satanism in the end. I have known Satanists who were raised as atheists. I've known Satanists who were devoutly into some spiritual religion or another at some point earlier in their life. I've known Satanists who first heard of Satanism because it was mentioned when there were people burning churches in Norway in the late 1990s. And then there are Satanists like myself who first heard of Satanism from all the hysteria going on with the Satanic Panic in the 1980s. There are Satanists who were into witchcraft and occult dabbling and saw some witchcraft documentary back in the 1970s, or some witchcraft book back in the 1970s where Satanism somehow got a mention in the middle of it, and that led them on the path. So again, my point is that the important part is that you found it, even if it was pseudo-Satanism from whatever decade that ironically helped lead you to it. Now, Stampy calls himself a DeFacto Satanist and says that this is where he'll be until he joins the Church of Satan. And I told him, no, if you already read the Satanic Bible, if you've already read it and sincerely see yourself in that, then I would say you are a Satanist. Joining the Church of Satan can certainly open a lot of doors for you as a Satanist. I've talked about that in some prior Satansplain episodes, but it is not necessary to join the Church of Satan in order to be a Satanist. We state that explicitly right on the Church of Satan website, churchofsatan.com. The term de facto Satanist is a term you will hear Satanists use now and then, but what that really refers to is a person we may find in history, say, who had certain beliefs and behaviors that we would now say are pretty damn satanic, and maybe, in fact, the person would have come to identify as a Satanist had the religion actually existed in his or her time. So you could view them as Satanists in the philosophical sense, but they didn't identify as such since the concept hadn't been formulated yet. So they are de facto Satanists. Will writes, I'm writing to offer both praise and questions that I'd like to send your way. Firstly, thank you so much for your incredible podcast, as Satansplain has given me innumerable tools, notes, and answers to questions as I've been moving away from my Phase 1 mentality. Everything that you've provided has truly helped me grow as a Satanist and has even motivated me to begin greater magic rituals. In fact, I just completed my first earlier tonight. Congratulations on all your accomplishments you've obtained through your work. It is very well deserved. I wanted to comment on your episode talking about Charlie Kirk, which has clearly left you with divided responses. As a fellow Satanist and someone who deeply enjoys your podcast, I just wanted to say thank you. I personally hold political views different from your own, and speaking for myself, didn't really like Kirk at all, but I thank you for your objective analysis on the events surrounding such an intense event and offering a true satanic third side. This may have seemed an unnecessary paragraph, or that it's beating a dead horse, or political podcaster at this point, but I figured you might appreciate a more neutral thank you for that episode. I do have a question I want to ask you in reference to the Goodguy badge that LaVey has spoken about in his writings. And just to pause the reading of Will's letter here for a moment, Will is referring to the essay The Goodguy Badge by Anton LaVey, which was published in the essay collection book, The Devil's Notebook. I went over this in Satansplain episode number 85. But anyway, Will says, I work as a nurse specializing in critical care with certifications and training that allow me to take care of sick or injured people effectively from the point of injury all the way through a stay in the ICU. In my free time, I enjoy volunteering with a nonprofit that provides peer support groups for anyone struggling with doubts or questions about their religious upbringing, mainly Christians and Muslims questioning if their God is real and helping them arrive at a more objective and realistic conclusion. Both of these jobs would, to a large population, seem like something a good guy would naturally do. I have my own selfish reasons that I enjoy both aspects, but I wanted to get your input on how this seems to you. Is it arguably more satanic to work as a good guy on the surface while actually doing it more for selfish reasons? Or is even the perception of being a good guy simply unsatanic behavior? Well, thank you again for the work that you put out so consistently. Your podcast truly is a library of information to anyone wanting to learn more about our philosophy or hone their skills as a Satanist. Keep up the incredible work. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Will. I wrote back to Will. I said, great to hear that you've taken the plunge into satanic ritual, and I'm happy to know that Satansplain helped you along in that regard. And thank you for your favorable response to the Charlie Kirk episode. Yes, I recorded it knowing full well that there would be Satanists pretty much politically opposite of Kirk, and I tried to make some points that I thought would be valid for Satanists across the political spectrum. Now, as for Will's job, I said to Will, you said, quote, I have my own selfish reasons that I enjoy both aspects. And I would say stop right there. I would say that is enough to satanically justify it. There is nothing wrong with a Satanist opting to do some kind of work in healthcare or charity or something else that involves helping people, for lack of a better term. It is great to also take pride in the work if you like it and you feel you're succeeding at it when so many other people wouldn't be able to accomplish what you do. And yes, one could argue that there's a satanic virtue in doing all of this satanic work, instilling the seeds of religious doubt, etc., as a perceived good guy. And then, after work, being able to say to oneself, at the end of the day, if they only knew. So true good guy badge behavior is instead something parasitic. Remember that the essay talks about the good guy badge wearer absolutely needing an audience. And with winter coming up, there are people who usually volunteer at soup kitchens and the like. I've read stories about some of these volunteers imagining that the job would be them handing out food to a line of homeless people and basking in the virtue signaling as they help one person after another. And then they're disappointed when the volunteer work that they get is actually doing something like moving a 50-pound bag of rice in an empty basement, or stacking crates, or having to drive out and buy trash bags, But getting back to this idea of the healthcare industry and jobs with that, a character that popped into my mind is House. I don't know if you've ever seen House MD, the TV series, but it surrounds Dr. House, who is this expert doctor and solves all these problems. And he has a lot of satanic qualities, I would say. And some people who've reviewed the show have explained him as somebody who's not into being a doctor for, humanitarian reasons and to help people, but because he kind of sees this as a puzzle to solve each time, there's a health thing, and gets a kind of a deep left brain enjoyment out of it. So, yeah, check out that series sometime. Some pretty satanic lines in it, I would say. Up next, I have a rather poetic email from Darius, who writes, "Hello, Magister Bill M. Life and death, according to a Satanist. One day I will die. Over my dead body, other eternal phenomena will unfold. Over me, too. The vastness of the universe will continue to unfold. Should I fear death? I believe not. What do you think?" Well, I told Darius that what I first think about here is that chapter in the Satanic Bible on life and death. I think it explains the Satanic view on the topic quite well. Humans create religions for a number of reasons, and one of them is to offer interpretations and explanations about various natural phenomena of life. And one of the biggest ones is the general concept of life and death. Thus, it seems that every religion has some kind of proposed answers about this life and about death, and Satanism is no exception. We do say in the Satanic Bible, life is the great indulgence, death the great abstinence, and the chapter goes on to talk about many of the nuances that may come with that. But as for fearing death, I think it's normal for Satanists and other humans for that matter to fear death, at least in some way. After all, I am an animal, and as with other animals, I have a survival drive. I have an instinct for self-preservation. So I'm naturally going to try to avoid immediate death. I'm going to do my best to avoid dangerous situations that could get me killed. After all, I'm enjoying life, and I have responsibilities, so avoiding death is in my best interests. Quite simply, I've got shit to do. Of course, if by the notion of fearing death you mean being paranoid about dying, well, that's another story. I think it's silly and impractical to be paranoid about death when you take the fear to irrational degrees. So, for example, car accidents are one of the leading causes of death, but that doesn't mean I never get into a car myself. I do drive my car, and it's silly to think that the only options are to drive in constant fear of a car accident or never drive at all. So what I do is what most rational people do, at least the ones who own cars. I just try to minimize my risk for death by driving responsibly. I wear a seatbelt, I use turn signals, I stop at red lights, and so on. So obviously when it comes to things that have a chance of above 0% of resulting in death, you have to weigh the risks and the benefits. As for people who claim they don't fear death because of religious reasons, like, oh, I don't fear dying because I know I'll go to heaven when I die. Or, well, life and death are really illusions and the truth is Buddha's attainment of nirvana. No. That's just delusional thinking. Those are pipe dreams. Remember Satanic Statement number 2, Satan represents vital existence instead of spiritual pipe dreams. We reject those sorts of things as Satanists. Let's get to one last email here. Ampy from South Africa writes, I would love to hear your personal opinion and or observations as a practicing Satanist on conversions of famous atheists like Ayaan Hirsi Ali to Christianity. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that name right. I know I've seen it before. This, after Richard Dawkins, for example, declared himself a cultural Christian some while ago, kind of saying he enjoys the ritual expression in singing hymns and the social cohesion of that culture, and perhaps as a bulwark against Islamism. Some of the reasons given for Aeon's conversion were, 1, a personal search for meaning, peace, and a moral compass that she felt was not fulfilled by atheism. 2, she found a sense of permanence and a belief in miracles in the Christian faith, which she sees as enriching and not solely a political statement. And 3, she also believes Christianity is crucial for the West to provide a moral framework. I have heard some of this reasoning in one of Peter H. Gilmore's interviews from the Thinking Atheist radio blog from October 16th, 2012, explaining that atheism alone neglects the emotional and ritual aspects the human animal needs and argues that Satanism adequately addresses that need for serious seekers. I recently heard about this from Sam Harris's latest Q&A, and his idea was that mindfulness meditation was, in his view, a much more prudent avenue to pursue in life with real spiritual benefits. I really enjoy and appreciate your podcast. It's one of my favorites, and I believe you are doing a lot of good in the world by attacking the last vestiges of satanic panic and unreason. So I wrote back to Ampy with thanks for the praise. As I always try to point out, atheism really means nothing more than not believing in any deities. Theism means believing in a deity, and the prefix a, well, you put a prefix a in front of a word, and that means without. So atheism is a condition literally meaning without a belief in deity. That's honestly all the word atheism means. I've also seen other atheists as well as Christians erroneously try to stretch the meaning of atheism to include additional ideas beyond that, but it really doesn't. Now, you could argue that the average self-avowed atheist has certain other traits more often than not. You know, if somebody told me I was this person was an atheist, I would, maybe bet money against, for certain traits they may have. I mean, in my experience, the average atheist is somebody who, besides, of course, not believing in any gods, also claims to value the scientific method, rejects all notions of the supernatural, rejects the entire notion of religion, for that matter, and philosophically adheres to something that might fall in line with secular humanism. But again, that is not always the case. Those traits are not part of the definition of atheism in and of itself. And for example, it's not always true that atheists accept the science of biological evolution. The Raelian movement, for example, is a group of atheists who reject the science of biological evolution, and they believe that humans were created and placed here by aliens. Likewise, I know some atheists who believe in ghosts and the paranormal. A ghost is not a deity, so this does not conflict with the definition of atheism, not believing in deities. And of course, there are atheists like you and I who do not believe in any gods and are thus atheists by definition, but additionally practice a particular religion. Not all religions are theistic. Some are non-theistic. So besides the existence of atheists who may be Satanists, there are also atheists who are Theravada Buddhists, there are atheists who are Jainists, there are atheists who are Taoists, there are atheists who are Scientologists. Those are all examples of religions where a belief in deity is not part of the dogma. For that matter, there are certainly people who don't have a religion, but definitely aren't atheists either. You know, the sort of people who will say, well, I don't know what I believe, but I believe in God. Okay, well then at the very least we can say that person is not an atheist, even if they don't have a religion. So again, atheism does not mean the lack of religion, doesn't mean the lack of any and all supernatural beliefs. It has a very specific meaning that is right in the word. Not believing in deities. Oh, and just in case there are any people out there who try to argue, but as a Satanist, you believe you are your own God, so that means you are not an atheist, because you believe in the existence of one God, that God is you. Okay, well, I've addressed this in some prior episodes of Satansplain, and when I say I'm my own God, that's just a symbolic and philosophical statement that I put myself in roles that most other people have normally put an external notion of God in place of. And I'll say more about those specifics later. I do not believe I am a god in the literal supernatural sense. I don't think such things exist. Therefore, I am an atheist. An analogy I've used is that you may run into an entrepreneur, for example, who says that he does not have a boss because he's an entrepreneur, and at the same time he may say that he is his own boss because he's an entrepreneur. So he has no boss, but he is his own boss. That's not hypocrisy. That's not a contradiction. That's just two different ways of saying essentially the same thing. When an entrepreneur says he's his own boss, it doesn't mean he literally has conversations with himself and writes paychecks from himself to himself. No, it means that he decides on what hours he's going to work, what his work assignments are. He takes the ultimate risk and responsibility for his business and so on. So likewise, as a Satanist, I am literally an atheist. I do not believe in deities, and I philosophically am my own god. You would think this is a simple concept, but I can't tell you how many willfully ignorant idiots out there I've run into who have no comprehension of hyperbole or symbolism, and they just don't get this. Anyway, once in a while I'll run into somebody online who asks, well, if Satanists are atheists, then why don't you just say you're atheists? And the answer to that would be obvious by now. We don't do it for the same reason that Christians don't simply call themselves monotheists, or that Hindus don't simply call themselves polytheists. Those terms, atheism, monotheism, polytheism, they don't describe anything more than how many deities you believe in. You need more than one stance on one issue to define a whole belief system. And as anybody who has bothered to do even a minimal amount of research into Satanism knows, it doesn't begin and end with atheism. But regarding religion and the human need for it, I've been running into atheists for decades now who seem to think that if we just educate enough people on science and logic, then we can rid the world of religion, and a new age of human enlightenment will come. In fact, atheists have been saying that since the alleged Age of Enlightenment period in the 1800s. Now, obviously, it's not that simple. In fact, in the interview that Ampy here mentions, Magus Gilmore points out that what the Satanic Bible points out, and that is, to quote a line, man needs ceremony and ritual, fantasy, and enchantment. Now, I don't think religion is the only place people can fulfill some or all of those needs. We see, for example, people who may get their kicks for these things by wearing a sports jersey and going to ball games, and finding a solidarity with the other fans, or geeking out on a sci-fi franchise, or getting heavily into political ideologies with all their symbols and mantras and martyrs and holidays and so on. But even aside from all that, I do think trying to rid the world of religion is an unrealistic goal. I sincerely believe that even if you were to somehow wipe out the world's religions, people would just make new ones. Again, I think at least on the whole, people have those underlying needs for symbolism and fantasy and the like, and also dogma. Most people want some kind of framework or foundation of ideas they can build off of. I know I do for myself. The Satanic Bible's chapter, The God You Save May Be Yourself, takes this all a step further, talking about the example person who tries to find more elaborate forms of spirituality to deny the fact that there really isn't anything spiritual. There's only the carnal. Now, getting back to the specific examples in Ampy's email, I can understand people like Richard Dawkins enjoying cultural Christianity, as he calls it, because he was raised in the Western world, and I could see how he takes a secular approach to enjoying singing traditional songs with groups of people and social cohesion, I guess. I do see how that can work against the Islamization of the West by merely having something that people can enjoy in large numbers and maintain a culture that resists being taken over by another culture. This kind of gets into Ali's view that Christianity is, quote, crucial for the West to provide a moral framework. I hear that particular argument from Christians a lot, and I still don't buy it. I think it's silly to think of my only choices as Islamization or explicitly Judeo-Christian world. I reject all three of the Abrahamic religions. I am a proud American citizen, but I reject this claim, for example, that the Ten Commandments form some kind of bedrock of Western world values. Submission to the God of Abraham? I mean, read the list. Keep the Sabbath holy. Don't desire your neighbor's house. As for things like don't murder and don't steal, those rules are hardly unique to the Ten Commandments. They show up in other sets of moral codes that have come about when people got together and decided on some practical rules for a populace. I suppose, though, that one could argue that humans, in the West or otherwise, are basically sheep, and thus, on the whole, they need those sorts of rules and fear of a boogeyman, especially, to keep them in line. Now, if that's the crux of Ali's argument, then maybe she has a point there. Of course, there will always be those of us who don't buy into those superstitions. As a Satanist, I state that there is no spiritual, there is only the carnal. But as I also state in the Satansplain introduction, we still recognize the psychological power and fun of symbols and rituals. So we make use of Satan as mythology's most fitting mascot for what we're about. Well, let's end the episode on that note. Thank you for listening to Satansplain. We'll see you next time. Hail Satan.
You have been listening to Satansplain. For more information about the show, visit the official website at Satansplain.com. And for more information about Satanism itself, visit churchofsatan.com. This episode, copyright 2025, Magister Bill M.